Behind me, Northwest Las Vegas stretches out with streets and houses for miles. Just a few years ago, hardly any of this development was here. And in a few more years, even the vacant land we can still see will be scooped up with new development. The development keeps on coming. Welcome to the Flood Channel. I'm Erin Neff. Keeping up with all that development is important so we can keep flood protection in place. And how we do that is with major studies every 5 years. Here's a look at our latest master plan. State law requires the district to create master plans every 5 years. These plans examine existing and future development, along with the watershed, soils, and the facilities already in the ground.
We have a very robust master plan, and it's a dynamic system. It's always growing, and with new development and with each project we complete, the plan changes. So we always need to evaluate our assumptions that we've made in the past, because a lot of what we do is a plan into the future of we're looking at what is going to happen, how the properties are going to develop, where the roads are going to be, where the best place to locate our facilities are. So every now and then we need to take a look at what those assumptions are they still valid, and so then we look at, in a 5-year cycle, that's a good time to really take a hard look at our plan and make sure that we're headed in the right direction with our plan.
The major study involves so much data and analysis, the district hired consultants with Atkins to perform the work.
A master plan update is extremely labor intensive, as you can might imagine. The effort it takes to perform a master plan update is usually best done by a consultant.
Atkins first conducted a master plan for the district in 1996 and was awarded this contract after a bidding process.
Considering that we have done this for so many years, we feel like we are one of the partners with the district. We understand what it entails, and we kind of bring that right mix of experience, but at the same time, we are not limited to just using what we have done in the past. We have always strived to bring in new technology and adapt and do different things that we need to do to get to that next level.
Although this type of study is done every 5 years, the last master plan occurred back in 2013, and this was after a period of recession that resulted in few new developments. This current master plan really went back 10 years, back to 2008, to make sure everything was considered.
Now since then, since 2013, the economy has improved, development is booming again in Las Vegas Valley, which is great. Projects are happening. And so we've also had lots of differences in land use. The planners are back out, looking out into the future again. And so we have a bunch of new technical information that we needed to gather. And really, we needed to gather it all the way from 2008. So it was a 10-year process for a lot of the big, robust changes we made for the 2018 MPU. So we have a cost tool that we've developed that quickly and easily allows you to get a planning cost for what some of these facilities will cost a developer or a city, whoever's designing the project. And it's very important. I mean, there are planning level costs, but they're pretty good. We did a very extensive review of construction costs for facilities, and so we have a pretty good idea of what a flood control facility will cost in today's dollars, and we can use that out into the future to help plan our resources in order to fund those projects, and others, developers or other entities that are building flood control projects, can use that as well. Our master plan since the 1990s has been a great tool for all of the engineers. Any kind of a land development project or a roadway project, any engineer would use our master plan. And I think the first thing that most engineers do when they get a site or a project is get our master plan out, see what impacts they can expect from flooding onto their project.
In order to compile all this information, the district in Atkins worked with Clark County and the cities of Henderson, Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas. Each local entity highlighted its biggest hot spots that needed new flood control facilities.
And usually these were monthly, and we would bring up issues, we would present some of the solutions that we had, and we would talk amongst the group and get consensus among everyone. And then just with follow-up action items was important to try to get things moving in the right direction with all of the different stakeholders that were involved.
The entire process took nearly 2 years. Sometimes small disputes arose around bordering areas.
Of course, there were hiccups as usual. The district was great in helping us facilitate and meet together with the entities to have a common solution. There were times where the district had an opinion from one stakeholder that was different than what the other person wanted to do, and they just had to make a decision and do the best that they could. And as Atkins, we tried to support that with the technical data and our experience with the watershed and with the facilities and with the technology that would support the decisions that the district was making.
Data helped drive all of these decisions. Much of it was uploaded into a cloud technology created just for this process.
Regional Flood Control District has always been on the forefront of technology. They have been investing in technology for a long time, especially in their GIS, Geographic Information System. They've made a lot of strides in that. The flood maps and everything that you have on your websites are really cool. So and part of it, Atkins was part of developing as part of previous master plans. So the goal was always to use that GIS as a foundation for everything that we do as part of this MPU, and then essentially streamline the process.
The master plan was recently adopted by all of the local entities. It's now being used by planners and engineers to make sure flood control facilities can be designed, planned, and constructed in the best way possible.
It's a great way for anyone who's using our plan to not only understand what's happening to their local project, but also to understand how it affects our entire network. And that is really something that in the past all had to be done manually, and it's very difficult to chase down an issue that might occur far miles downstream of your project. And now with these tools you can size based on our rainfall. You can determine what size facility you will need and if that has any other impacts anywhere else in our system, and then be able to mitigate those impacts on paper before we actually go out and construct in the field, which is a really big deal. It's a big time saver for taxpayers and a big time saver and money saver for all the entities in the district itself.
The plan itself is a one-stop shop to get information about soils, land use, existing and planned development, and water flow rates.
I'm very excited. There's the plans we've created are easier to use. They're bigger scope, and you can drill down into them. And a lot of the engineers like to get into the weeds of the details, and you can do that with this plan. I think people are going to be very excited to use this and see how much it helps them in their day-to-day work. And we're here to help if people have any questions. But certainly, I think people are going to be impressed.
Lake Mead is full of life, a seemingly endless aquatic parade, attracting and sustaining busy desert creatures. It's one of the most diverse ecosystems in Nevada, with species found nowhere else on Earth. But every time soap suds run down your driveway, oil drips in the streets, fertilizer washes off your lawn, or random trash gets swept in our storm sewers, their home gets a little uglier. They get a little sicker. If we don't take simple steps to change our ways, soon you'll wonder where all our friends have gone. It's time to clean up our act, Southern Nevada. To get your home or business lake-friendly certified, visit belakefriendly.com.
The master plan tries to keep up with progress, but one thing it can't anticipate is things that happen in Washington, D.C. Here's a look at how the federal government shutdown and other things happening in Washington impact flood control.
We interact a lot with the federal government. The USGS, the National Weather Service, BLM are just some typical federal agencies that we deal with on a daily basis really to get our projects done. And so when the federal government was shut down, we did feel an impact for that.
There's almost an alphabet soup of federal agencies with whom the district works. There's NWS for weather forecasting, BLM for land management, EPA for permits, USGS for geologic surveying of gauges.
Even though they were still issuing forecasts and watches and warnings, some of the tools that they used were deteriorated because of the shutdown. In terms of the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, they maintain a number of gauges across the country, and several of those are here in the Clark County area. We have 10 gauges actually that they maintain. That maintenance was not done during the shutdown. Those employees were furloughed actually, and they couldn't report to work. And so what that means to us is, we rely on that data during storm events to make sure that we know how much rain is falling in different areas, what water levels are. And they also go out and ground truth what they're seeing on the gauge, what the gauges are telling them, make sure that things don't need to be calibrated and that type of thing. And that wasn't being done as well. So I guess all in all, there was some impacts to the flood control district. I wouldn't say there was anything mission critical that we had a problem with, but certainly we had an impact to our operations here at the flood control district.
On a daily basis, the district works with federal partners for environmental permitting and some land use decisions. Any days off for those partners slows down the district's work.
The federal partners that we work with, they're very busy. They're doing a lot of permits and a lot of different things every day. And so this shutdown that we had did create a backlog for them. So now not only are they trying to get their day-to-day work done, but they gotta work through a backlog over the 35 days that the government was closed. Things kept piling up on their desk. And so now, a lot of things we do with the federal government are already pretty slow, and now they're going to be even slower because of the shutdown.
The federal government also oversees flood insurance policies.
In terms of FEMA, we have the National Flood Insurance Program. We were fortunate with this shutdown that's actually covered under a different continuing resolution that wasn't affected by the shutdown. So they were still able to issue insurance policies and pay in insurance claims, even though the portions of the government were shut down. However, they're on a continuing resolution now that will expire in the not too distant future, and it's pretty uncertain for a program like that. If they don't have a good budget and secure funding for that program, it really needs to be extended. As much as 5 years would be a good probably time frame to extend that, or at least provide a budget for the National Flood Insurance Program, just to provide them certainty. When a property is in a flood zone, they're required, if it's a federally backed mortgage again, to pay flood insurance, which is pretty expensive. And if we can revise those flood zone limits based on the projects being completed and the threat is reduced in those areas, they can actually reduce or eliminate their insurance and save them, quite a bit of money over the year as a result of that. So postponing or delaying these changes to these maps can be a significant economic impact to some people that live in flood zone areas. It's kind of difficult on the local level when we see the disagreements and things going on in Washington. Things can't get through, can't get done. We're kind of uncertain on what policies are affecting us, and that makes our job a lot more difficult. From a local level, it's a lot easier to streamline things and get things done, but when you're dealing with a federal project, it just adds up to years in some cases. The costs go up because we're dealing with these agencies that, If they just had us to deal with, it'd probably be a lot quicker, but they're dealing with a lot of different agencies and not just ours. And so I understand that there's plenty of backlog, but providing them the tools that they need to get their job done, the personnel they need to get their job done is important, and it can really affect us locally on getting our mission completed.
Even though the shutdown is over, the ongoing turmoil in Washington, D.C. over the border wall could cause even bigger problems for flood agencies nationwide.
So there's a concern on the part of general managers and public works directors and other agencies across the country that if the Congress and the Trump administration can't come to terms on the border security, and the Trump administration decides to declare an emergency to get the wall funding, that funding will be diverted from the Department of Defense to build that wall, which is part of the Army Corps of Engineers uses, or is part of the Department of Defense, and that's their funding. It could be their funding that is taken to build the wall. And so that means money, if money is coming out of one pot and going into this pot, that first pot is being affected. And so there's a lot of concern across the country that there's ongoing flood projects that are being built that might get stalled or might get postponed because their funding is going to get diverted to build the wall. And that brings on a whole host of other problems, particularly in flood control, because if you're building a flood control facility and you have to stop in the middle, for example, sometimes it's worse than before the flood project even started. If you have an incomplete project, they get stopped and then has to start up again at a future date. And so that's a big concern. We're not, no one's sure where the money is going to come from, but that we've heard that's one avenue that may happen, and so that's a worry across the nation really at this point.
This large detention basin serves as a first line of defense for all of the houses below. Water that comes into this basin from the mountains drains underground in large box culverts. And recently, our engineers went to see just where those box culverts are built. Jensen Precast is one of the local manufacturers who makes the box culverts we use in construction of flood control storm drains. Engineers toured the North Las Vegas plant to see the boxes being made.
Las Vegas is one of our larger kind of flagship plants in the system. Jensen Precast has about 8 production facilities. You guys may know we have one up in Reno. It's kind of where we started. We've been here in Vegas since about 1972 at this property, and we've been privately owned and operated since 1968. So this plant does quite a bit of volume. We're known here locally for our manhole products, concrete pipe, manholes, utility structures. We do a lot of work for NV Energy, CenturyLink. So you'll see a lot of utility vaults and boxes. So we've got a pretty diverse product line. So you'll kind of see some things that may or may not be applicable for flood control, but we have about 20 different product lines, and we produce a lot of them here at this plant.
Box culverts are made of concrete poured over rebar that's been formed into a cage. Standard concrete mixes are monitored, the mill is certified, and the steel is audited. But engineers got to see that process for themselves.
All of the products that go in the ground, we're able to see them. We're familiar with the people that are manufacturing them. We know the plant managers. And so we're not hauling in materials and products that have been constructed in another state. They're literally down the road. So that's a good thing on a lot of fronts. One, we're aware of what's being built. We know who's making it, but also the costs are cheaper when you don't have to haul that far away. And so that familiarity is a good thing for us, I think.
On a construction site, the box culverts are trucked in from the plant. The tour was a good way to ensure the quality of what is being made.
Boxes and pipes are really the building blocks of our facilities. I mean, they're used on almost every project. And so for us to be able to see that is just a really good thing for us. I mean, we're out at the construction site, so we see those boxes and pipes when they come on the truck. We see them go in the ground, we see them being covered with dirt, but what we don't see a lot of times out there is the actual production. And so I guess that's kind of like a good cookie or something. If you want to really see it, it's the ingredients that are going into that. So you can think of that as going to the plant. We can actually see what's going into the boxes. We see the people making them. And yeah, so it's kind of quality control, it's inspection, and then obviously just that relationship with those people is really important too.
The rebar cages are the reinforced steel that supports the giant concrete boxes.
So we do the reinforcing steel in-house for about 95% of our product line. And that's over here, we'll show you that. And then we have the actual concrete production component. So we have our own batching equipment, our own batch plant. We batch all kinds of mix designs. Some of them are agency specific. We have a lot of standard mixes. So once the reinforcing operation's done, the reinforcing cages are delivered to the forms. We batch concrete, and then that's its own process.
Engineers watched concrete poured and asked questions throughout the process. One thing they learned was how steel tariffs are impacting Jensen's costs for rebar.
In total, about 25%. And it's not unique to us, it's our entire industry. It's, you know, without going into the politics behind it, it's definitely creating ripple effects. It's like the oil prices. The steel behaves very similar to that.
A lot of times on the back end, all we might see for something like a cost would be a certain cost per linear foot. So they might say, to make a box this size, it costs us $1,000 per linear foot. Well, there are so many things that go into that cost. And so there's steel, there's labor, there's the molds, there's the time it takes. All of that comes into that cost. And so when we're out there at the plant, that's really where you start to see all the different components, all the different things involved to make this one 8-foot segment of boxes. And then you think of our jobs that sometimes have miles and miles of storm drains, and all those costs roll in. And so when something we hear that steel, there might be tariffs, those prices might be going up, we know those are important things for us to be aware of because it's certainly going to impact our planning and our funding and the cost of our facilities.
Rowley liked to watch any process at Jensen that optimized time.
One of the things I thought was interesting was they had this stencil gun, which I'd never seen before, but it was basically like a little gun, and they could type in a label of what they wanted it to say. And so it might say like the size of the box and the date it was manufactured and which projects it's going to. And then the guy that was working on the box can just take that gun and just run it across the concrete box, and it just stenciled it right on there in seconds, which, you know, I've seen before. It used to be a stencil with spray paint or something else. So to see just those small things you never even think twice about when you're out in the field, but all those little intricacies that come together to make the final product.
Jensen also manufactures prefabricated buildings. Engineers got to see the new restrooms for Arizona state parks and a building shaped like a water bottle that's used locally as a water refill business. Jensen also makes the buildings housing our weather monitoring stations.
At Jensen at the plant, they make a wide variety of concrete products. And so for us in flood control, we're mostly interested in the storm drains. So that was primarily circular pipe and then rectangular concrete boxes. And those, you know, they fit together end to end to form a long run of storm drain. And so we're able to see that. They also make manholes, which is basically like a vertical cylinder that connects the road to the underground storm drain, and it allows someone to climb down in and access the storm drain. They also make drop inlets, which is like on the roads, when the water's on the road, we have these curb openings and grates, and that's where the water enters our system. So they're doing that. And another one that they're recently doing is they're prefabricating some, they look like concrete sheds or buildings that we call monitoring stations. And those house like our monitoring equipment and rain gauges and radio antennas and all sorts of things that help us to monitor a flood and the rainfall real time during a rainfall event. So.
Rowley shared with his kids the things he enjoyed the most on the tour, the stencil gun and rebar fastener. But the tour wasn't just about those cool applications.
I think we pride ourselves in being involved in all aspects of these flood control jobs. So whether that's the design phase where we're out going to meetings, meeting with the city or the engineering teams, then we get into construction and we're out working with inspectors and the contractor, or something like this where we actually go to a manufacturer and see what's going on there. But I think seeing all of it, the more we can be out, the more we're familiar with what's going on out there, that translates well to the office and then the plans we're making here and the designs that we're coming up with. And so all these different pieces of the puzzle coming together. So for sure, for us to get out, we build those relationships, we learn something every time, and it's always been a good thing.
A lot goes into flood control that you just can't see, whether it's master planning, the federal government shutdown, or local manufacturing. But one place you can always get information about the flood control district is on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and you can get up-to-the-minute information on our website at befloodsafe.com.